There was a climber on Mount Everest in 2006 who did something no one had done before he filmed himself dying. His name was Igor Tushinsky, and he was a Ukrainian mountaineer who decided to document his entire climb on a small digital camera. What he captured on that footage is one of the most haunting and medically significant records of high-altitude death ever recorded. I older say, sit tight, because now I'm going to explain what actually happened. Igor Tushinsky was born in Ukraine in 1984. He grew up in a country with a strong mountaineering tradition. The Soviet Union had produced some of the world's greatest climbers, and Ukraine had contributed many of them. Igor grew up with mountains in the distance, with stories of climbers who had summited the world's highest peaks. By his early 20s, he had decided that he would join that tradition. He had summited Kilimanjaro at 5,895 meters. He had summited Mount Elbrus at 5,642 meters. He had proven that his body could handle altitude. And now, at 22 years old, he wanted to attempt the ultimate Mount Everest at 8,849 meters. But Igor had an idea that would make his climb different from other climbs. He would document it. He would bring a small digital video camera to Everest and record everything: the journey, the suffering, the triumph. This was 2006, before GoPro cameras existed, before action cams were standard mountaineering equipment. Most climbers didn't film. The few who did usually had professional film crews. Igor was planning to do it alone, with basic equipment, documenting his own experience in real time. He wanted to show the world what Everest actually looked like, what it actually felt like, what it actually cost. In April 2006, Igor arrived at Everest Base Camp on the north side in Tibet. Base camp sits at 5,364 meters, and even at that altitude, climbers experience the beginning of altitude sickness. Headaches, nausea, shortness of breath. Igor started filming immediately. His first videos showed the base camp sprawling across the Rongbuk Glacier, hundreds of tents, dozens of expeditions, climbers from around the world, all converging on the same mountain. He filmed the Sherpa porters preparing loads. He filmed the prayer flags that Buddhist climbers had hung. He filmed the sunrise hitting the north face of Everest, casting long shadows across the ice. Igor's expedition was a small operation, just Igor and two Sherpa guides named Pemba and Dorje. They had hired a local operator to organize logistics. The plan was straightforward: acclimatize through April, attempt the summit in May during the weather window, descend, and return to Tibet. Igor would film the entire process. His camera would be his constant companion. The first rotation took the three of them from base camp to Camp 1 at 6,400 meters. Igor filmed the walk across the Rongbuk Glacier, the crevasses they crossed, the fixed ropes they used. His footage showed the technical challenges of the approach, nothing catastrophic, but constant exposure. He filmed Pemba and Dorje working, moving with the efficiency that comes from decades of experience. He filmed himself struggling, breathing heavily, moving slowly. The altitude was already affecting him noticeably. By late April, Igor was at Camp 2 at 6,500 meters. The footage from this point showed him becoming quieter, less energetic. He was experiencing real altitude sickness, not the mild kind that acclimatization cures, but the kind that compounds with time. And height. His face in the videos was paler. His movements were slower. Pemba and Dorje were watching him carefully now. They were discussing whether he should continue. Igor insisted he wanted to push higher. He had come too far to turn back. He had invested too much time and money. He had promised people back in Ukraine that he would summit. By May 10th, Igor was at Camp 3 at 7,500 meters. The footage from this altitude showed something changing in Igor's demeanor. His speech was slurring slightly. His movements were becoming uncoordinated. His brain was being starved of oxygen. Pemba suggested descending. Igor refused. He said he felt okay. He said the summit was close. He said he could make it. What he didn't realize was that his brain, the organ responsible for accurate self-assessment, was the same organ that was being destroyed by the lack of oxygen. His judgment was compromised by the very condition killing him. On May 15th, Igor and his guides left Camp 4, which sits at 8,200 meters, for the final push toward the summit. The plan was to summit on May 16th and descend the same day. But the climb took longer than expected. Igor was moving slowly. His body was not cooperating with his will. His guides had to stop frequently, had to help him move from one section to the next. By the time afternoon arrived, Igor's oxygen saturation had dropped to dangerous levels. His breathing was labored. His movements were becoming erratic. At approximately 5 p.m. on May 15th, at around 8,400 meters on the north face, Igor's body began to fail completely. His Sherpa guides realized what was happening. They were witnessing high-altitude cerebral edema HACE, where the brain swells from lack of oxygen. Igor's behavior had become confused. He was hallucinating slightly. He was not responding appropriately to instructions. Pemba was trying to get him to descend. Igor was resisting. He wanted to keep climbing. His brain was no longer capable of understanding that keeping climbing meant dying, and this is where Igor's footage becomes uniquely important. Despite his condition, Igor continued to hold his camera and film. His later videos show him moving unsteadily, moving toward higher altitude despite his guide's protests. The footage is shaky, disorienting, difficult to watch, but it is also a real-time documentation of cerebral edema progression. His speech becomes increasingly incoherent. His movements become increasingly erratic. His decision-making becomes increasingly irrational. This is what extreme altitude does to the human brain. By 8 p.m. on May 15th, Igor could no longer stand unsupported. His guides were essentially carrying him down the mountain. Now, the footage shows them holding him, moving him, trying to get him to lower altitude where his brain might have a chance to recover. But they were at 8,400 meters in the dark. The temperature was minus 40 degrees Celsius. Igor's core temperature was dropping. His brain was swelling. His lungs were probably filling with fluid from the altitude-induced pulmonary edema that often accompanies cerebral edema. At approximately 9:47 p.m. on May 15th, Igor Tushinsky died. He was 22 years old. He had been filming his own death for several hours without fully comprehending that he was dying. His guides descended with his body through the night, moving as fast as the darkness and terrain allowed. By morning, Igor's body was secured at a lower camp. His camera, recovered from his pack, contained the footage of his final hours. What makes Igor's death medically significant is that his footage provides visual documentation of HACE progression that rarely exists. Most climbers who develop severe cerebral edema either die before anyone thinks to document it, or they survive and can only describe their symptoms verbally afterward. Igor's video shows the actual physical progression of brain swelling at extreme altitude, the confusion, the lack of coordination, the inability to make rational decisions, the body's complete failure of basic functions. His footage has been studied by high-altitude medicine researchers. It has been shown in training courses for mountain guides. It has become part of the medical literature on what extreme altitude does to the human brain. Igor Tushinsky wanted to document Everest. Instead, he left behind documentation of human mortality. I'm Isaac from The Mountain Takes. Igor Tushinsky was 22 years old. He wanted to show the world what Everest actually meant. He did, but not in the way he intended. His footage showed the mountain's absolute indifference to human ambition, human will, human dreams. If you've ever wondered what happens to the brain at extreme altitude, if you've ever questioned whether willpower alone can overcome the physics of oxygen deprivation, Igor's footage is the answer. Subscribe, because there are more stories of mountains that document their own victims. I'll see you on the next descent.